So there's a massive report that is coming out right now that has a lot of Raider fans concerned that the Raiders could actually be looking to trade our superstar pass rusher Maxx Crosby. This is coming out from ESPN Insider, or at least a guy that once worked for ESPN as an insider. That is going to be Trey Wingo. He's putting that after saying, breaking, according to sources, the Dallas Cowboys have made inquiries with the Raiders about a potential trade for Maxx Crosby. And this has a lot of people talking like, hey, if the Cowboys are reaching out to the Raiders about potentially trading for Maxx Crosby, could the Raiders actually move off of Maxx? And there's also another element to this that it obviously isn't in this tweet, but there was another report where Vince Bonsignore spoke to Mark Davis a little bit, and I believe it was like an owner's meeting or something that kind of happened yesterday. And Mark Davis was basically frustrated with the Las Vegas Raiders, right? He's frustrated with kind of what happened out there. But he did make it clear that he isn't looking to fire anyone, right? Like Pete Carroll's not going to be fired. John Spytek's not going to be fired. But some people are saying that, hey, there's a chance that the Raiders did not realize the actual build that it was going to take, or the time frame of how long it's going to take for the Raiders to actually be a good football team. And now the Raiders front office, right, John Spytek, Pete Carroll, may have actually started to realize that, hey, this is going to take longer than what you may have thought. And now some people are saying the Raiders could even look to potentially do an entire rebuild, where you essentially try to get as many assets as you can. And the benefit of that is, you have maybe 3 first-round picks by trading Maxx. Maybe you trade guys like Malcolm and Tyree and Butler and some of these other guys that might have some assets. Maybe it's Jackson Powers-Johnson potentially, right? Maybe the Raiders move some of these guys, get those draft picks, and then look to restart, where you can bring in a bunch of younger players that you can kind of, build with. And then more than that, you obviously have to kind of get your quarterback at that point. But some people are saying that the Raiders could actually consider trading Maxx Crosby. And from a salary cap perspective, it's not awful, right? Based off of what we're kind of seeing. Honestly, I thought it would have been a lot worse, given we just gave him a contract. But according to this guy here, who's the co-founder of Spytek, he's saying that the new team would acquire Maxx Crosby at these cap hits, which that's actually incredible. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, man. If you're the San Francisco 49ers, if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, the Dallas Cowboys, and you truly need a defensive end, and you're truly interested in bringing one of these guys in, this could actually make sense. $20 million for Maxx for this year is very cheap. $30 million next year is still super, super, super cheap, given guys like Micah Parsons are making over $40 million. And then you get these 3 years, less than $30 million. We'll probably get 5 or 6 more defensive ends paid in the $40 million range by then. You're basically trading for Maxx Crosby, and the contract's super favorable as well. And then at the same time for the Raiders, to get out of this, it's really not that much dead cap. Like $18 million this year, which obviously that would suck, but only $5 million in dead cap next year for the Raiders. And obviously for the Raiders, if you trade Maxx Crosby, you're looking for 3 first-round picks. And if it's not 3 first-round picks, it has to be equivalent to that, right? Maybe you get 2 first-round picks and a player as well. Maybe it's a young player, a young up-and-coming player. Maybe the Dallas Cowboys say, hey, we'll trade you Tyler Booker, right? You guys have need on the interior offensive line. We'll give you this guy. Or, if it's not Tyler Booker, maybe it's a different guy, right? But I think that would be the starting point. I also think it's just kind of wild to think the Raiders are going to trade Maxx Crosby. Honestly, I would be shocked to see the Raiders say, hey, we're going to start a rebuild, and Maxx Crosby's not here, and he's not part of that rebuild. Truth be told, even as Trey Wingo's reaching out to the Raiders, or Trey Wingo's saying the Cowboys are reaching out to the Raiders, that doesn't mean the Raiders are reaching out. And it doesn't mean the Raiders are saying, we want to trade Maxx Crosby. We're shopping him, right? Those aren't the same two things, essentially. So even though the Cowboys may have actually realistically reached out on Maxx Crosby, that doesn't mean the Raiders are 100% saying we're going to trade Maxx to the Dallas Cowboys. Plus, regardless of like what Maxx is making right now, he's going to want a new contract in 2 to 3 years. And if he goes to a new team, he's definitely going to want a new contract. So any team that trades for Maxx, not only are you giving up a bunch of assets, but, on top of that, then you have to redo the contract, pay him a little bit more. You also have to make sure you have the current cap dollars. And I'm not sure that the Dallas Cowboys have that, to be 100% honest. I think they're like on the hook for like $70 million for Dak Prescott this year. And Dak's played really well. And yes, the Cowboys could obviously use Maxx, and it would make them a lot better. Plus, you can look at the other argument of it, which is that the Raiders are not using Maxx the right way. And I don't really want to get into this, but Pete Carroll's scheme, man, it's really hindered Maxx Crosby and the type of player he's shown us that he is. Max is, he's an outside linebacker essentially, right? He's an edge player. He's not a guy that is like a true defensive end where you're going to put him closer to the inside. Maxx Crosby's not a 3 technique, a 4-eye, or a 5 tech. And Maxx Crosby's not Tyree Wilson. Maxx Crosby is an outside guy. You put him on the edge and you let him freely pass rush, let him freely make plays. And the Raiders aren't doing that, and I think that's kind of hindered Max a little bit. But regardless, it wouldn't make sense for the Raiders to trade Max at this point. I think the best way forward for the Raiders at this point, there are some guys that should not be here, and we'll talk about one of those guys here in a second. But there's some guys you could sell if you want to sell. Deanna Rossini actually put it out there saying the Raiders are actually calling for some defensive back help as recently as last week. So the Raiders aren't ready to give up on this season, and I don't think Pete Carroll or John Spytek are going to give up at all either, right? Mark Davis has basically told us, although he's frustrated, he's not moving off these guys. He's going to let these guys, quote, do their job. That's literally what Mark Davis said. So when Mark Davis is going to let these guys actually do their jobs, I think that means keeping our best players. I don't see the Raiders benefiting a whole lot trading Max, because at that point, you're looking for another Maxx Crosby in the draft. So you already have him. You just keep him. This just kind of naturally makes sense. You can still figure out the quarterback position. As you get into this offseason, if you win 3 or 4 games this season, you'll still have a top 5 pick at that point. So you can figure out the quarterback position at that point when that happens. Right now, the Raiders just look to get better. And surprisingly, one of the ways they think they're going to get better is by practicing during their bye weeks. And I know a lot of Raider fans, I already know what you guys are going to say. All right, a lot of you guys are already going to say, hey, the Raiders suck. They need all the practice they can get. But, you don't generally practice during their bye weeks. And again, I know Pete Carroll's a different type of coach, right? You don't usually practice during your bye weeks. And I can guarantee you guys right now, some Raiders veteran players are looking at this like, what the hell are we doing? And I know the Raiders need to practice because they suck. I get that. And I'm not arguing that. But it's just kind of crazy to me that the Raiders are going to practice during the bye weeks. I think you have to have, I believe it's like 5 consecutive days off during the bye week. So the Raiders will practice twice this week. They'll probably practice today and tomorrow, and then they'll have Thursday through Monday off, right? They'll have those 4 or 5 days off. So I understand for the Raiders, you'll still hit the requirement where you get enough guys or enough days off, but most teams just say take the entire week off, rest, relax, go see your family, and then come back on the other side of this. The Raiders are saying we're going to practice. And it's the approach of, hey, we're tough. You're not playing up to par, so we're going to be a little bit tougher on you. I don't know. It's just an interesting thing. And I'm not saying it's right or I'm not saying it's wrong, but I just find it interesting that they're practicing during the bye week. It just doesn't make sense to me. Unless this was already determined weeks back, which I doubt. It's crazy to me that the Raiders are practicing now. Obviously, we need to practice, but I also just want to throw this out there. 2 extra days of practice is not going to do anything for the Raiders at this point. You've had all of the offseason to implement your scheme and system. You've had every single day up to this point as the season started, right? It's been 7 weeks. 2 extra practices is not going to do anything. Your scheme hasn't been installed properly. The players don't really fit the scheme, as we kind of talked about yesterday. To me, this is really not going to change anything. I don't think this is going to cause a spark that the Raiders think it's going to cause. And I just see players quitting sooner rather than later. I don't know why. I just feel like Raiders players are going to start to quit. And I know there's already reports that some of these players are quitting. So I'm not going to disagree with that report. Maybe they have already quit, but I don't know. I find this interesting, right? Now with them practicing, Jakobi Meyers actually spoke, or at least he was spoken to. And Jakobi Meyers reiterated his desire to be traded, but said he hasn't talked to the team about it since before the season. He also had one other comment that he made. Ryan McFadden said he asked Meyers on if he would still like a new deal with the Raiders. Jakobi Meyers said the following, I quote, "I honestly haven't thought too much about it. Like the window kind of just closed with the offseason in it. If it gets done, I don't care for real. I just really want to be in a good spot for me and my family." So, to me, this kind of says Jakobi Meyers doesn't really want to be with the Raiders. This tells me Jakobi Meyers, obviously he said that he hasn't spoken about the contract with the Raiders since the offseason. But he's saying that that window just kind of closed when the offseason kind of ended. Right? Jakobi Meyers is saying that I haven't spoke to the Raiders and they didn't make it happen when they should have potentially made it happen. And essentially he's saying he still wants to be traded and he wants his family to be in a good spot, which is understandable, right? He only got $33 million guaranteed when he signed that last contract. Before that, I believe he was a UDFA. So even that, his first contract is probably like less than probably like 7-8 million, which 48 million's a lot, but you throw in taxes and fees and all that stuff, he probably has made 20 million at this point, which is still a lot of money, but he's a good wide receiver. And for the rest of his life, what he's about to do in this next season or two, that's going to set his, the next 40 years of his life up, right? So I understand he wants to get that contract. But to me, what this seems is like Jakobi Meyers is kind of checked out, right? This tells me right here, Jakobi Meyers is done with the Raiders. He doesn't really want to be here. And he's still showing up because he's a good teammate. But more than that, he probably just doesn't want to be fined, to be honest. Probably just doesn't want more money to be taken from him. And that's understandable. And it's also understandable he wants this contract. But if you really think about it, John Spytek basically fumbled this entire situation. In my opinion, when Jakobi Meyers first asked for the contract, the Raiders should have made it happen. And if they did not want to pay him, if their mindset already was that, hey, we're not 100% sold on you, we think you need to kind of prove yourself, they should not let Jakobi Meyers have made it public, right? They should not have allowed that to happen. They should have traded him before that point. Or they should have given him some sort of, here's a bump in your salary, here's a little bit more guaranteed money. They should have done something before it came out, because when it comes out, what's happening now, and I think this is what's happening right now, is teams are saying, hey, we already have to pay Jakobi Meyers more money. We're not going to give you a second-round pick or a third-round pick for a young, talented wide receiver because we know he doesn't want to be with you guys. And we know at the end of this season, we can get him for free anyways. So why give you a third-round pick when we can get him for free this offseason? He literally does not want to be with you guys. He literally does not want to play for you. And he didn't play this last week, right? And I know he practiced in full today as did Brock Bowers. I still don't think Jakobi Meyers will ever play for the Raiders again. I think he's done. And I know he's practicing today, but I think that's more so of optics. And maybe, hey, Jakobi, because he's not playing, obviously, right? And he's looking to get traded. I don't think he's truly hurt. I don't buy that story. I think he wants to be traded, and he's kind of decided, I'm gonna just sit out. And I think he told the Raiders, hey, go ahead and trade me. We'll do this whole thing where we kind of pretend that I'm playing with you guys and I'm still here for you guys. But I don't think that's actually truly what's happening. And I think what's happened at this point is John Spytek has not gotten an offer that he likes. Right now, the only offers the Raiders are going to get is, the Carolina Panthers might hit up the Raiders and say, hey, we'll give you our 6th-round pick. You give us Jakobi Meyers and your 7th-round pick. So you move up, you get an extra pick late, right? Or it's not even an extra pick. You're giving up a play and a pick. But you basically go up one round with one of your picks. I think that's all the Raiders are going to get at this point because Jakobi Meyers has already made it clear he does not essentially want to be with the Raiders. And the fact that he's saying, I don't care for real if it gets done, essentially, I don't know. I think John Spytek's made this mistake already with Jakobi Meyers, and I don't blame him. He's a young general manager. He'll learn from this situation. He'll obviously grow and get better, but I do hope he gets better as a general manager because a lot of what he's done up to this point doesn't make sense. And something tells me Jackson Powers-Johnson may actually be on the way out. I don't know why. I have a feeling that JPJ may not be here, in 3 weeks from now. We'll see what actually ends up happening. We got a couple more things that I want to just quickly touch on. The Raiders did actually go out and they signed a guard, but then they also released a guard that they just brought in last week. So the Raiders brought in McClendon Curtis last week, and they released him, and they swapped him out with a different guard. Now, I don't disagree with this move, I'll be honest with you guys. Layden Robinson, when he was cut by the New England Patriots, actually, it surprised me. I'm not going to lie to you guys. So I believe he was a rookie last year. He may have came out the year before, but he started a lot of games for the Patriots last year, and he looked pretty damn good. And you guys can just watch some of these plays. Like, he's physical, he's aggressive. You can see the power on tape. You can see this guy dominating people out there. And keep in mind, he's like 24, 25 years old right now. He hasn't played a lot of football, but he did play last year. So you see a guy like Layden Robinson out there. He's making plays. He's doing things. And, to me, this is what the Raiders have needed all along. And it's kind of crazy because, I think there's a chance Jackson Powers-Johnson may be gone. I wonder if this is the move that kind of shows that the Raiders are potentially moving off of JPJ. I don't know, right? Something tells me this could mean that they're moving off of JPJ. It might not, right? Because they brought in McClendon Curtis last week too. But it is interesting because, you do bench JPJ. He struggled a little bit. You go to Alex Kappa, and I don't want to get into that because you guys know how I feel about it. But you're now bringing in another guy. This guy's actually started a little bit. And, I would have told you guys early on in the process that, hey, we need to bring in bully type of players, physical type of players, right? The Layden Robinson type of guys that are stronger, that you're not going to easily bully. And we're just too late. We're 7 weeks too late. And we are 2-5 at this point, partly because of the coaching staff and the decisions that they've kind of made. To me, I think the Raiders bringing in Robinson could mean that they're going to move off of JPJ, or it could just be nothing, that just need an extra body. Either way, I do like him. I do think he's a pretty good football player. DJ Turner is coming back to the Raiders. I did not even know he wasn't with the Raiders at this point. I don't know, but we also released JT Woods. And this one's kind of interesting too, because Woods, there was a time in preseason, I think at the end of preseason, when they were saying he may start for the Raiders, right? Or at least he'd be like that third safety when we got into like our big nickel package. So the Raiders have released him as well. Not a huge amount of transactions, right? But the Raiders are trying to get better. They are trying to upgrade. We'll see what ends up happening. Obviously, this season's kind of washed at this point. But I do hope the Raiders can be competitive in the second half of this season, right? Or the next stretch of this season after the bye week. I hope they can be competitive and actually show us that going into next season, maybe this team has a little bit, if John Spytek can revamp the offensive line, we'd be in a much better spot, right? And that's going to obviously probably happen this offseason. Now, I think the Raiders could easily just move JPJ to center, and then you have your center. But you still need to get the left guard, and right tackle. I'm not sold on DJ Glaze. We'll see if he's actually the guy or not. But at the very least, you'll need 2 new guards to put JPJ back at center. And they're probably not going to do that, right? So at this point, you probably need a center and left guard. So if John Spytek can get that done, I think the Raiders could have a little bit of success. But we'll see. I don't really, being honest, I don't really believe in John Spytek being able to revamp the offensive line. Going into this season, the fact that he thought the group was good enough speaks of the evaluation process that he does, right? It speaks of what he sees as a guy watching tape of offensive linemen. I could have watched that unit last year and said, hey, Dylan Parham's not a starting caliber guy. Jordan Meredith isn't really a starting caliber guy. They're good players that can kind of play, but they're not starting caliber guys. They're not long-term guys. So we'll see what ends up happening, man. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time with another video.